When I saw that the #1 selling computer of all times was coming to Nintendo's Wagglefest Virtual Console, well, I just knew that they had to bring their best, and my interests were extremely piqued. I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games, and today I look at the Commodore 64 on the Nintendo Wii.
Second Opinion Games.
First up, we have International Karate, and of course it's just Karate Champ, like from the NES. Now, I remember the controls on that were really complicated, even though the NES had like 2 buttons, and the Commodore 64 controller has 1. It's kind of like an Atari 2600 controller, just done a lot more cheaply made. Yeah, even cheaper than the Atari one. So when I hit that button again, I can't actually start the game. Luckily, you could bring up the operation manual and you start to figure out how exactly to do all of the really complicated moves. Man, they made this rough. You only have 1 button, but you can somehow do all these moves. Also, you really have to look to figure out how to start the game. You have to hit the B button on the back of the Wiimote to bring up the keyboard, and then you have to hit the right F button in order to start either 1-player or 2-player. And then you jump into the game, and it's actually really difficult to even land a punch. I'm really confused what's going on. Trying to do a simple jump kick is nearly impossible, but I really like how the sound effects are here. And you could even figure out how to shut off the sound effects or the sound, which, because the sound effects are the sound, it's the same exact thing. When you do land a punch, I like the animations, and the background is really cool, but when I do defeat this other character, well, I don't see another background. This is the whole game right here. Also, you're fighting against the time clock more than you're fighting against the person, trying to get ahead and then try to avoid him. But if you fall behind, well, then you really have to rush at him as fast as you can, and then chances are you're going to get hit and fall and die. And International Karate, they really tried hard to bring a good fighting game to the Commodore 64, but couldn't quite pull it off. Moving on to Cybernoid. This is a shooter, but it doesn't control exactly how you think it would. See, there's actually gravity here, so when you're not hitting any direction, your ship is pulled down. Also, there are tons of pickups that you could have where you could leave behind mines, but I haven't found any real use for them. You could switch back and forth by using the 1 button this time, or the B button, depending on if you're using the classic controller or the Wiimote itself. I recommend using the classic controller for this game because sometimes you're going to bring up the keyboard when you don't want to. This is not something you want to do when you're playing a highly intense game, and especially one that seems to be one of the most difficult shooters ever made. Not only do you have to avoid gunfire, but you also have little traps that you have to maneuver your ship around, and because of that weird gravity system, it doesn't make it easy. Also, the hit detection is really bad sometimes, so that gets frustrating. And look, I'm only like 3 screens into this game. That's right, it's all done by screen, so there's no actual scrolling here, and I'm stuck waiting for the lasers to stop shooting so I can move on. And eventually, I just die and explode in place because there is no rhyme or reason to this gunfire, and there happens to be a time limit that when that runs out, your ship blows up and you are dead. I did manage to get fairly far into this game, but granted, I'm only like 8 or 9 screens into the game, and then so many ships come at you at once that it's hard to believe anyone can clear any farther into it. And if you do, well, then it's more flying through tight spaces with bad hit detection, making this game nearly impossible. Then we try out Boulder Dash. You're just a little guy running around in a maze trying to collect gems and being aware of the boulders that might fall on you, crushing you dead. Now, at least I heard of this game before. It was an arcade game at the time, and it's actually pretty darn fun. Running through these mazes gets really complicated because sometimes the boulders can trap you in place, and then you have to wait for the time to run out or hit the reset button. Also, you never really know when the boulders are gonna fall and roll down at you, it seems to be almost random. You could also push the boulders if you dig out the right amount of dirt behind them, so there's that. And there is some enemies sometimes, like this one thing. I don't know what it does, but trust me, I don't want to go anywhere near it. There's also a time limit here, which luckily comes into place if you happen to get yourself stuck, but sometimes it can get you killed if you can't figure out how to get to some of the gems, because just everything is wonky as all heck, and you never know what's going on with these boulders and how deadly they could be. There seems to be lots of levels here too, and the controls are pretty good. There's also some random glitching going on in the background, and I don't know what that is. This is one of those games that when you finish, you want to pick it up and play it again and again, just thinking one more time. Maybe I can make it a little bit farther. Even though there's no music and the sound effects are rather crude, I gotta say, this is probably one of the best games on the Commodore 64. And how about California Games? When you start it up, it has some really good music, being that Louie Louie song, and that sounds kind of cool. When you hit the start button, well, you jump into a whole lot of static on the screen. This is really weird. I thought I actually broke my system when this happened, but no, the next set of menus opened up, and it even gives you the option to go back to that title screen and listen to Louie Louie all over again, and that would have been cool, but no, I actually want to jump into the games. So I jump into the character select, and I have to pull up that keyboard to type in a name and then choose sponsor, and then I have to pick another one, player 2. Okay, so I do that, and player 3. Okay, that's weird. Okay, player 4. I didn't think I selected 4-player at any point in time, and then it wants me to put in a 5th player. No, I'm just stopping this right then and there. And then I realized that you could actually pick as many or as few players as you want, and the game will just keep on going until you actually fill in these. So I finally start with all 4 of my players, and I try out skateboarding on the half pike. Now, the only thing I can figure out how to do on this is just turn around, and it's pretty difficult. Most of the time I fall over and totally eat the pavement, and it really hurts. Then I move on to Footbag, which is a game that I often call hacky sack, and when I complete it with one of my characters, there's all these tricks that it shows you that you're supposed to try to do, and I didn't do any of them. But one thing I can do is continuously bounce the footbag on my head. I guess they probably should have called it headbag. Sometimes a bird flies overhead, and you could kill it dead with your headbag too. And eventually you'll get a trophy for some awesome headbagging. Then we move on to surfing. Now here I didn't know what to do. I thought I was supposed to do some sort of crazy jumps and tricks, but I couldn't land any of them. So eventually I just started moving entirely to the right, hoping to get to the next level, honestly, because I couldn't figure out any of this. The graphics here were fairly good, though. And then we move on to skating. Now, the controls here are kind of neat. You have to hit up and down for the skating motion, but also holding up or holding down can have your character move up or down itself. The jump button is the fire button on the controller, so jumping over obstacles seems to be easy. And if you hit back on the controller, you could do a little spin move for some extra points. This is probably one of the best games on California Games, and it's one I found pretty interesting. Then we move on to BMX, where you ride a bike, but you don't really ride it that well, because I never feel in control over this at all. You push forward a bunch of times to move up really fast, and then there's so much crap on the course you fall over again and again. Bringing us to flying discs, where it's just frisbee. You hit back and forth to throw the frisbee, and then your character tries to catch it. I didn't know that you could actually move the character according until about 4 or 5 characters into the game. And I did manage to catch one of these, but most of the time I just dive and eat dirt non-stop. California Games could be good with a lot of practice, but it's probably more fun to play with friends. Maybe I'll have more luck with summer games. We have an opening ceremony that looks fairly neat, and an ending ceremony where a guy on a jetpack flies by as it slowly fades to night. And then we actually jump into the games, like the triple jump, which I couldn't figure out at all how to pull this off whatsoever, and I never did. So I moved on to rowing, where you just hit up and down or left and right, I can't even remember which, on the controller until you get to the finish line. Okay, that's kind of cool. Then we move on to horse, where you work as a horseback rider trying to jump over stuff. And I don't think I'm in control over this horse at all. I know in real life I can't ride a horse to save my life, and it seems that I'm just as bad on this video game. Then I move on to fencing, which I knew that this was going to be pretty crude on the Commodore 64, but this is about as crude as it possibly gets. If you hold in the button and push forward, well, then you could walk without doing any type of fancy jabs. And then when you get close, just tap the button or press forward a whole bunch of times until eventually you win. Yes, that's how fencing works. Just waggle your little foil thing around like crazy, and hopefully your opponent just walks right into it. Then we move on to some type of bike racing. It works pretty much the exact same way that rowing does, only now you're on a bicycle, and it seems to be a lot harder because I can't do this at all. And then we move on to kayaking, which is just really hard to control. I like the water sound effects in the background, and the graphics are pretty neat. This has probably the most video game playing in any of these games, but I really couldn't figure it out, at least not to the very end, and by that point I really wanted to avoid this game at all costs. Summer Games is just kind of bad. Then we have Tower Toppler. I gotta say, graphically, this is definitely the best we've seen yet. It has a cool rotating 3D type of perspective going on, and too bad there's just one button though. So your jump, you have to hit forward and the action button at the same time to jump, or just not hit any direction in the action button to fire something that can kill some things, but not others. Also, there's doors that you have to use to go up the tower, and right away you'll find out that you have to go in these doors because there's a trap, and it took me a while to figure out that no matter what I do, I can't get by these traps. So I go into the doors, I work my way up the tower, and then I find myself in predicaments that just get really frustrating. However, this is one of those games that the closer you get to the top, the more you want to keep playing. Now, you're gonna die again and again, and you're gonna get hit and fall down this tower countless times, but you always strive to get to the very top. And just when you think you have it, it just gets crumbled away. Now, I have to say, this game is a lot of fun, but also extremely frustrating because every single time I think I have it, I don't. And this is the very first level of the game. Why did they have to make it so difficult? I mean, Mario Brothers really had it down because when you ran to the right, you eventually beat the level really easy. They could have at least gave me a couple of towers that were sort of gimmies, and there's also a time limit that you have to watch non-stop because that is almost as hard as navigating through the tower itself. Oh, it's just frustrating, but maybe just one more game, and then one more after that. This one is really addictive, and I mean really addictive. Then we have Pit Stop 2. This is a racing game, and it's a split-screen racing game where you race against another opponent, but there's also cars that happen to be on the race car track that just try to get in your way. After a while, you might end up smashed alongside the road, which is what happens to me, and there's even pit stops in this game too. Hey, that's the game, Pit Stop 2. So yeah, that's something. I really like the animations with the pit stops themselves, but just trying to make it that far is nearly impossible because all these cars ram you off the road. And even though I'm playing on the easiest level, I just get creamed every single time. There's also quite a few maps that you could choose from, and you could even set them up all at once, like some type of huge Grand Prix, and that's kind of cool, but the sound effects are just so awful. They just destroy your ears as you play, and the graphics are kind of bad. Even though at the time, this was probably really pushing things forward, now it's just unplayable. Kind of stay away from Pit Stop 2. Then we have Last Ninja. Now, I love ninja-based games, and when I jumped into this, I couldn't figure out how to do anything. It's a strange isometric view where you play as a ninja that can't do anything. I eventually find a sword, but I couldn't even pick it up. I don't know if I have to use a keyboard. I went into the manual, and holy crap, is there ever a lot of reading this game is really complicated, and I just want to hit the button to kill my ninja because I don't think I want to play this. So maybe The Last Ninja 2 would be even better. Well, you start off as a ninja in a band, I guess. You move on to the next screen where there's a dude. At least this guy I could possibly beat up, even though he takes over half my energy, and still I don't have a weapon, and then I am stuck in this room, not doing anything. I cannot figure out how to make it any farther in this game. So eventually I hit the button to self-destruct until my very last ninja 2 dies. Haha. That's the title of the name again. So there we go. This is every Commodore 64 game to be released for the Virtual Console on the Wii. We had, of course, International Karate, which is Karate Champ, but it only has the one background. It is really cool to see the slightly better graphics over the Nintendo, though. Cybernoid is a shooter that's really painfully frustrating to play because it's way too difficult and the hit detection just isn't there. Boulder Dash is extremely fun, but also rather frustrating, but it does keep you wanting to go back to it again and again. California Games has lots of variety, and some of the games are decent to play. Summer Games has lots of variety, and none of the games are decent to play. Tower Toppler is a lot of fun, with graphics that really push what the Commodore 64 can do, but is also one of those painfully frustrating games, but just has you coming back to it again and again, because it's really fun at the same time. So I don't know what to think about this one. Maybe if I tried a different version. Pit Stop 2 is a racing game that could have looked good at the time, but sounds absolutely horrible and doesn't play good by any means. The Last Ninja probably was one of those really ambitious games, but it's just garbage. And The Last Ninja 2, I couldn't even get past the second screen of the game. So after looking at all these Virtual Console games, do I think it might be worth it to own a Commodore 64 just to play video games on? No, I really don't think so, but there probably is some really good ones out there if you're willing to look someplace other than Nintendo's Virtual Console. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found it at least somewhat informative, because I did not have the best time making this one. I know that there was one or two of you that wanted to see what the Commodore 64 was all about, including myself, which is why I found all these games really interesting at the time, but quickly found myself just moving on to the next one almost as fast as it took to download them themselves. Luckily, no one has a Wii with these channels on anymore except for me, so you don't have to put yourself through that kind of punishment. I already did it for you. And if you have some type of weird game that you want me to play on a system that no one else will, make sure you leave me a comment in the comment box down below. And until later, I will see you again, guys.